Mr. Bond, they have a saying in Chicago, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, the third time it's enemy action. Hello, it's Duncan. In this mini episode we'll look at finding and fixing an intermittent bug and how we might stop the same sort of thing recurring.
Ha! There it is. I've been getting the occasional test failures when I run all tests. And it tends to be in list.doc tests, sometimes in one of the other approvals tests. And the symptoms are pretty much like this. We get null characters in our output. Now, Alison, our boss, hasn't reported seeing this in production, but it's reproducible, at least randomly. So let's try and get to the bottom of it. First of all, let's try running just those tests. That's okay, one off, but let's repeat it lots of times. And we can do that with repeated test, I think. So we'll call this repeated test. And I think we tell it how many times. So we'll say 1,000 times. And we'll do that for both of our tests. And run that. Well, 2,000 tests were run and 2,000 tests pass, which suggests that run on its own, this test is okay. That's a bit strange. Let's go back to running all tests again. Seems to be okay. It's almost like running the repeated test has now made it pass okay. Well, that's not good for us, so let's back those changes out. Run again. And it passes and fails, I reckon, 1 in 4 times. Let's check it's failing the same way. And there we are, null, null, nulls. Very strange. Now, I'm reasonably sure this has only started happening recently. I'd say in the last couple of episodes. So let's go back in source control and see whether we can repeat it earlier on. So we go here, say, check that out. And now try running all our tests. Little time to build now. Pass. Now, one of the problems with intermittent test failures is knowing how many times you have to run them in order to know whether they're going to fail. And I suppose we could do some statistics, but life's a bit short. But at that point, it seems to be okay. So let's have a look at the differences between the current state of the code and as it was then. What I think we'll do is we'll check out main and then diff with this revision. See what changes we've got. Well, a build file, that might be significant. But all we have there really is generate Duke, so I don't suspect that's the issue. Anything else? Well, we don't have a change in the stock list rendering tests, and we don't have a change in the rendering. It's all a bit strange. Let's go to Google. Why am I getting nulls in my... Let's ask the question. Do I mean why am I getting null to 2Ls? Well, maybe. Stack Overflow, why am I getting null when I pass the argument? We're not getting a null value, we're getting null characters. So let's say, why am I getting null characters in my handlebars output in Java? So this is handlebars output null for missing fields, but we don't have a missing field, we know that. And it's intermittent. So none of those look good. Expressions. No, I'm not saying anything good. So let's ask Bard instead. Take that question, copy it. Use Bard, let's ask the same thing. Why am I getting null characters in my handlebars output in Java? Question mark. He thinks, they think. Here are a few reasons. You're using a string that contains a null character. Well, I don't believe we are. You're using handlebars help that returns a null value. Again, I don't believe we are. There's a bug in the handlebars library. Well, that's possible, but we haven't changed it or upgraded it for a while, and I'm pretty sure it didn't used to be happening. So I don't think those are any of the answers. So let's go and look at the code that actually does the rendering. That's in our rendering package, and we have two things. We have stock list rendering, which is here, and we have our stock list view model, and this is where we render the price. We've got the price here, and if I run the test again until we get a failure, there we go, then we can see that it's one of these table rows is getting null, null, null in the place of this price. So let's go to the rendering code. That's here. And you see here we're creating a price string. It says we go and get the item price. When it's null, we put in an empty string. If it's a failure, we put in error, but otherwise we ask the price's value toString. So the thing, that table cell will be coming from price's value toString. So let's have a look at that. And here it is, and it's number format, the number of pence we have divided by 100, so that it's in pounds. Well, that all seems quite sensible, and code we wrote a long time ago, but formatting in Java is always a little bit suspect. Let's have a look at number format. I'll read some documentation, and here, helpfully, is the last bit of the Java doc. We have a section of synchronization, and it says number formats are generally not synchronized. It is recommended to create separate format instances for each thread. Threads. Well, that would explain the intermittent nature of our failures. But our stock list rendering is just going through these items one at a time. We're fetching the prices in parallel, but we're rendering them one by one. But as I think of it, we are running our tests in parallel. So we had this JUnit platform properties that says we are enabling parallel execution. And within a class, we're running everything on the same thread, but between classes, we're running on different threads. How long ago did we change this? Well, that was this month in my time. I would have said that the tests weren't failing immediately I made this change. But with things that are failing randomly, it's always hard to tell. So we have a hypothesis about what's causing the issue, which is that format is being called when two tests that need it are run at the same time. Are there two tests that need it? Well, let's go to the stock list rendering and see who calls this. When our stock list rendering tests call it directly, but then our list handler calls it, and we know that we render in our integration tests. So if our integration tests were running at the same time as our stock list rendering tests, we might expect concurrent access to that format. Okay, if this is the problem, what can we do about it? Well, we can go to our toString, and instead of having a single instance here, we can create a new one every time. And actually, we can do that just by making it a getter, so that we'll call number format get currency instance every time we access. I think it's a little subtle. It would be better probably as a function. And now we're going to have to run our tests a lot. We only have to see one failure to know that that hasn't worked, but we have to see a lot of successes to convince ourselves that it has. How many before you get bored? Well, I'll keep on doing this so you don't have to. Well, I'm going to call it, I think that's fixed. You'll have noticed that I don't comment code a lot, but I think this one deserves a comment, which is that this must be a function as number format, not thread safe. Okay, now we should ask ourselves, is this actually a bug in production? And I think the answer is it probably is. If we had two people rendering the stock list at the same time, they might well see this issue. As it is, though, the system is only used by Alison, so I suspect she's never seen it, and we got away with it. How do we allow this bug to happen? Well, I think in the back of my head, I think I know that date formats certainly aren't thread safe. But I think the Java API is a bit culpable here, because number format get currency instance for a locale sort of implies that it's returning the same object every time, that there is a currency instance for a locale. A getter is a property, you don't expect it to be returning a different object every time. But no excuses, this was my bug. Now that we should consider whether we have any other bugs that are the same in this code base. We could step up from number format to format and find instances of that in our code base. Not very helpful. I don't actually know how to search for any expressions in our code base whose type is format, but maybe we could just search for format. So, double to one decimal place, where we're creating a format every time there. This is a comment, this is a comment. In price, we have our number format. This is the change we've just made. And in stock list rendering, that's the other place. So let's go and have a look in stock list rendering. So here we have a date time formatter. Let's see what the documentation for that says. And we're searching here for thread. And it says a formatter created from a pattern can be used as many times as necessary. It is immutable and is thread safe. Are we creating from a pattern? Well, we're not. We're saying of localized date with locale. Let's go and have a look at this. Safe to say it's not actually giving us any guarantees. Date time formatter builder. Again, we'll search for thread. No, that's not us. But here it says this class is a mutable builder intended for use from a single thread. But that's the builder, not the thing that it returns. It's complicated, isn't it? But finally, going to the Java doc, at least for 1.8, we find this class is immutable and thread safe, which is good. So we can safely use this date format. Are there any others? Having found this one, is there any way we can prevent ourselves introducing a similar bug again? Well, I suppose I'm now more likely to be suspicious when I use a formatter. But apart maybe from writing a linter rule, I can't think of an economic way of doing this at the moment. One thing we could do would be to write a filter that checks that there are no nulls in our HTML output. But of course, other concurrency issues might result in different corruptions, not just nulls. I think I'm going to put the idea of that filter on the back burner for now. It's something we might implement if we're waiting for a long build or have a bit of time on a train. For now, let's check that in. The only changes are in price. It seems that the import rules have changed for reasons. And I think we might reasonably remove the type there just in order to tighten everything up. Okay then, run the test one last time. And commit as fix nulls in output when rendering prices concurrently. And if we're using bug tracking as opposed to post-it notes on a wall, we might want to put a number in there. Commit that. As you can see, I've bad depression. I've turned on Presentation Assistant so you can see shortcuts. Please let me know if that's working for you. And if you've enjoyed this, then I think you'll enjoy the book that I wrote in that price called Java to Kotlin, a Refactoring Guidebook, details of which are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching.